Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this video is going to be kind of a crash course on IndexedDB. Obviously, it will not be exhaustive, like I'll not be able to cover everything in IndexedDB, but I think this should give you a basic fundamentals about how you can go about using IndexedDB and and why should you use IndexedDB. I would suggest you to check out MDN, but on the surface level, local storage just gives you 5 MB and it always gives you stringified data. It's like you can only put data which can be serialized in kind of like an object can be serialized, but you can't store binary or these kinds of data. And IndexedDB allows you to do that. It's more like a tradition. It's more like having a relational database inside your browser. You can think in that terms because most of concepts which I'll be using will be somewhat familiar to if you know SQL or something like that. Like you have basically interacted with relational database in some form or some way, at least maybe NoSQL or something like that. This is needed. Just a disclaimer. So you should be familiar with relational database somewhat because I'll be using those jargons here and there wherever it's required. So, anyways, as you can see, we have a form here with a basic form with name, origin, years old. It is basically adding this data to our IndexedDB, updating data, deleting data, and obviously having a list of users here. So let me get started first of all. So let me show the basic code. We have an index.html where we have a basic form here. Labels we have for the name as well as ID to connect them together. And we have buttons which are type of button. And we have add, update, delete. And we have this list of users. And I have a main.ts. Most of the logic will be put in this main.ts file itself. So first of all, let me create a basic IndexedDB variable, which will be IDB database. I'll be using TypeScript because I'm assuming you are somewhat familiar with TypeScript as a whole. It's not so tough, and I think if you have not learned TypeScript in 2025, I suggest you should learn it. Otherwise, it's going to affect your career, I feel like. Let object store equal to null, and we'll be having a DB request object. I'll be explaining things as I go and code along. It will be easier for you to understand things as a whole. So what happens with IndexedDB is like you get it's a basically a web API. So you by default you get it inside your browser code. You don't need to do anything here. IndexedDB as a whole could be have written window.indexedb, but I'm assuming it's in part of window. Whenever you're not writing anything, it's part of window. So IndexedDB will be there by default. Then you have different kinds of things. First, I'll be using the open one. Open is basically for you to create a database or basically open a database. Like if you have interacted with MySQL or SQL or PostgreSQL, you need to first of all create a database in one way. So here we'll be creating our database, which will be user DB. And you need to give a version to it. By default, it will be zero version, but I think by default it will take one version if it doesn't exist. But I'll be giving one version because this version is very important here. I'll let you know why in a moment. And we can have different kinds of events which we can listen on this DB request object. The first event is upgrade needed. It's very important. This will be triggered when the database opens the first time or whenever we're changing the versions. Uh, and why the version change are important is like suppose if you want to change the structure of the data, like you have a different tables or you have different collection tables in the relational database and collections in no MongoDB or no SQL databases. So whenever you're changing the structure of the data, you need to come here and write the logic for it. So upgrade in is very important. It will be triggered when the database first time created or whether the version has changed. So this I'll write the code later. Another event is like this is on success that whenever it will always be triggered. If there has been no error as such, it will always be triggered. I'll show you when doing a console log later. But let me write it now. And suppose we have encountered an error for some reason, then we'll be having an error listener also. Let me add some of the default things here. For success always, we'll be having an event here. Let me give a type of any form now to keep TypeScript happy. Then EV is going to have the target, which will be IDB database. and I'll do console.log success. Well, let me do one thing. Let me not have it because I'll not be using it anyway in this, at least in this video. You can use it in other forms, but I'll be just keeping simple. So we have this, and now let me come here, upgrade needed. I'll just write EV for now, and just do console.upgrade needed. I'll just write upgrade here because anyway I'll be removing it later. So we have this. Let me come back to the here. Now let me open the application tab. Let me come to IndexedDB. As you can see, it has already created a user DB low. What will I do is like I'll come here, delete the database for now. File DB, I don't know what it is. I'll just delete it also. And let me now refresh it first time. So when I refresh the first time, it has created a database with the version of 1. It had called the upgrade needed and success. Now if I refresh it again, the next time only success will be triggered until unless I change the version. So I can change the version manually. 1 and make it to 2 because I assume now some structure has been changed, and that's why I want this event to be triggered, upgrade needed. So now if I come back, refresh, as you can see version is now 2 in here, as you can see, and in the upgrade needed also has been called again. I think it should have been called. I think it refreshed 2 twice. Okay, got it. Let me again update the version 3. This time just do save, Control S. Come back here. As you can see, upgrade was triggered. Now again, if I refresh it, first of all, the version is 3 now. Now if I refresh it next time onwards, again only success will be triggered. So that is the main concept which you need to know. Now let me add some basic things here. What all things you can interact with in the upgrade needed stuff. So we'll be first of having a DB. We want to create whenever we want to get the instance of the DB. Since we are having a global variable DB, we need to assign it in the upgrade needed. So we'll have ev.target, and it will have a property called result, which will give us the DB instance. This has given us the you can say the DB as a whole, the IDB data, the database, not the schema or collection, not the table or not collection schema till now. Anyway, I'll just have an old version to show you some of the things which are available inside it, which should be ev.old version, and then let new version will basically be the current version, which can be ev.new version, or otherwise it can be the db.version. Both will have it. So it's easy for us to track whenever some changes have been done from the current version to a different version of the database. So I'll write db updated from old version to new version. So now let me come back here. As you can see, now let me change the version for now once more to be 4. Save, come back. As you can see, db updated from 3 to 4. If you come back to application, we can see the version is 4 now. So now user DB, if I'll go inside, there is nothing much because I have not created any kind of table or collection in our database. So we need to do that now here. So we can write object store equal to db dot create object store. We need to give a name to it, which will be user store, and we need to give a primary key in the database terms. So the primary key will be ID because I'm assuming my each row or each data which user data will be having an ID key. So I need to I'm specifying the ID key here. So now if I save it, now if I come back, if I refresh, nothing will happen because the version has not been changed. So I have to again to manually trigger the version 5, save. So now version is 5, and now as you can see, we have a user store which is a key path of something and values this. Now again, if I change the version, for some reason because it will again call the upgrade needed. So, but you can assume that we already have a user store. So I think something should be happen wrong here, no? So let me do control save. Now if I come back here, as you can see, I have an error here, which is failed to create object store because I already been created. So whenever we're clearing upgrade needed, we need to again check whether something already been created or not. If it's not created, then we should not recreate it again, the same object. It maintains the uniqueness that way. So I need to again have an if condition here. If db dot object store names. If it already names will be having a DOM list, I guess. So we can have contains. We can give a string again the same name, which will be user store. If it already contains user store, basically if object has already been created, don't create it again, recreate it. So now if I save it, it's working fine as you can see, and nothing is an issue. Okay, I need to again change the version. No, I think I changed it. Yeah, I have changed it and it now ran successfully. The 6 it got updated. So that was the basic gist of it. Now I think we can go to some more advanced stuff, which is like adding it to the database, whatever we are adding in the form. So let me write first of all couple of DOM elements which will be interacting with it every time. So let me mention them now itself here. Country, age. I think only these three will be using. I'll be also be adding things to the user list. So I need to have a handle on that also. Now I have to have a handle on the buttons also. Add, update, delete. These are just the buttons which I have created in the index.html file. As you can see, add, update, delete. I'm just getting a reference in the JavaScript itself also. So now we have this. So now whenever you click on the add button, we'll be having an add event listener. Click. You can use a submit event also. I'm just keeping it simple because I want to have the same structure for all the other buttons also. Later on, will be just be copy pasting most of the things here and there. So anyway, we need to first of all prevent default behavior. I think it should not be triggered, but just I'm adding it in here because we are anyway not calling the from submit. I'll just add it anyways. And we'll just check if the DB is not there for some reason just to keep TypeScript happy. I'll just add a condition here so that DB will always be defined the next step onwards. So now what we have to do is whenever we're interacting in IndexedDB, everything should go in the form of a transaction. If you have worked with relational databases or I think NoSQL also nowadays, they give the transactions like you have a bank application where you are having some deduction from one account and increment in another account. So both should be a part of a transaction because otherwise the money will be going into thin air basically otherwise. So similarly in here also IndexedDB, we need to every interaction which you have with the IndexedDB needs to be in the form of a transaction. So I know some things are very much you can say redundant. So there are other helper libraries on top of it like Dexy.js, etc., which helps you a lot. But I feel like you need to know IndexedDB as a whole as well if you want to go in the long term in your career. So anyways, we'll be having a transaction here. Now I'm just showing you the syntax. Most of the concepts are similar. Then it's more like copy pasting same things again and again. Transaction. I need to give the store name as you can see in the VS Code tooltip. You need to give a type of what kind of mode. There are different kinds of mode: read write or read only. I'll be doing a read write because I'll be modifying the database also. So that's a read write it will be. Now you have different kinds of again handlers here also. There are different kinds of ways of adding handlers. You could have use add event listener, or you can use manually. You can do as a in the form of callbacks. I'll do it in the form of callbacks for these. This will be just transaction completed, and this will be transaction dot on error. Transaction transaction failed. So now I'll be having a transaction which will be just adding a user data in the form. So let user data equal to ID. I'll just give it for now. I'll not be using any kind of UUID or nano ID. I'll be just keeping a simple timestamp. I'll give it toString because simply I'm using it a string format. Name will be name is going to be the handle which I got from the top. It will be document handle, so I need to have value. Basic JavaScript stuff. Name, country will be again country dot value dot trim. Lastly, age. Age is nothing gonna be but the age value, but it's gonna be string by default whenever you're interacting from the forms. So I'll convert it to a integer using parse int. You could use number also, same thing. Now we'll be having let. Now we need to again, now like I mentioned to you previously, we need to have some kind of table or collection inside the IndexedDB, which will be referencing every time. So as you mentioned, as you can see here, I've mentioned that I'll be creating a user store inside the DB transaction. And as you can see, I've created that uh, table inside here also in the previously, like I mentioned just now. So I'll be having user data. No, sorry, I have already created a user's data, but I need to get a handle to it. I need to connect this transaction with the store. So to do that, I'll just write user store equal to transaction dot object store, which it gets, and just need to mention which store I'm trying to reference in this transaction. Now I'll create a request to it, which will be user store, which is on the top, which we get as a transaction format. Then we can add user data. And if suppose there are not different ways of handling, you can handle if some error happens in the transaction, you can handle it add request dot on success in here itself, or you can do it in a transaction. Like suppose you can do it in both places if you want, but I'll just keep it in one place only. So it's up to you if you want to do it. I'll just keep it simple and just do it in one place. Data added. Sorry. On error. This will be error adding data. So now whenever you try to add something, it should be added in database. So let me come back here, refresh. As you can see, nothing is there. Now I'll just add my name, India, years old. I'll just add some random value, add user. Okay. Something went wrong. Mm, let me see if I missed something. Add button, add events listener, e.print, it doesn't matter. Transaction, DB transaction, read write, on complete, on error. Let user data is this. User store is this. Add request is user store dot add user data. Okay. Add request dot on success, data added, on error, error reading data. Let me see again what might be wrong. Move it. India. Okay. Version is 6. Object store is 1. Refresh database. Let me do one thing. Let me delete the database once. I think I'm missing something. Refresh. Database has been created. User store has been created. Now I'll try to add it again. Move it. India. 3. Add user. As you can see, it has been added. I think there was something missing when I was doing the changing of the versions. But anyways, as you can see, we have the ID and the data has been added. Now what we have to do is like we need to again build a list of users in here below so that whenever we're adding something, it gets updated inside below users, and so that we can whenever we click on any of the users, that form gets pre-filled with that data with that raw data, and we can update the raw data again, and then we could click on update user, it will update the user inside the database. Similarly, we can delete the user also. So let me come back here. First of all, let me now build the list. For that, I'll just create a function called function build list. This will again have a basic if check to keep Typescript happy. And I'll be again referring to user list which I created previously. In here, I'll just give an inner HTML. I'll give an li tag loading, so that by default it will be calling loading by default. Post that, I'll create again a transaction. Like whenever you're interacting with a store IndexedDb, like I mentioned, everything has to be in a form of transaction. Now we have added data, so we need to get the data. So to do that, we'll be calling the get, I think, all method, which will allow us to call all of the data which is present in the user store. So to do that, let me write the code. As you can see, it's somewhat redundant. Same code I'm only writing again and again. So it will be read only. Again, transaction on complete. To do going ahead, I'll not be writing. I'll be trying. Anyways, I'll write for this also. Let me just copy paste things instead of manually writing it again and again. So whenever if there's any error or something has happened, we'll be seeing the success and error scenarios, console logs. Now let me again write the user store again like in previously here. Basically, you should have a kind of a reusable function here, where you can have this transaction on complete on in a store. But since I want to keep it easier for you, and so that by the end of this video you can explore, so I'll be writing it manually again and again. Obviously, I'll be copy pasting, but it's just to make it clear with the syntax. Anyways, we'll be having get all request now. User store dot get all. Now here what you can do is like you can either have in the at the end of a transaction you can create a list which I mentioned just now. Otherwise you can have it in the form of on success on error also. For this I'll just do it in the on success on error only. In the on success basically, sorry. Let me add the code. It will become clear if it's confusing. So we have this on success. I'll not be adding the on error because nothing I'll be doing there. So I'll just add this on success here. As you can see, if you've not understood what is doing is like we are just basically iterating the result which we get, which will be all the entries. You can console log if you're getting doubts, but I'll just not be doing that. I'm assuming you know basic JavaScript, so that's why. So you have the result and you're just basically iterating out the result and creating a li tag for each of those entries. And you're adding the data key because as you can see, this is not React or Vue anything. This is just like plain JavaScript. So I need to do some way of interacting. So I'll be using this data key later on. That's why I'm adding it in here. Anyways, but you have this join list. So I think it should work fine. But we need to call this build list whenever something has been happened, like whenever we have added something to a database. So that's why what we need to do is like whenever this success gets triggered every time whenever refreshing it, we need to call this build list inside it first time. We'll be calling it at other places also, like whenever the transactions get completed first time, whenever it's like whenever the browser refreshes, if something is in the database, we'll be just building the list for the first time. Second time was whenever we're adding new users, we'll be again calling the build list, sorry. So this will happen on the scenario of add button, because transaction will be completed every time in the add button. We need to call the build list. We need to also reset the form. So we can again call user form and use a native JavaScript method, sorry, browser method reset. Save. Now let me come back here, refresh. There's some issue here. Let me delete everything. Refresh. India 23. Add user. I'm not exactly sure what's wrong. I'll just do one thing. I'll just update the version for once. Refresh. Name will be Mohit. India 23. Add user. As you can see, we have added the user. It's coming in the database also. Refresh it. Oh yeah, while refreshing, it's not coming because as you can see, one second, why is it not coming? Build list is being called. This should come and check the database. First time it should load. Let me come here and see. Success. Let me figure out what might be the issue for that. But anyways, as you can see, whenever I'm adding something like John USA 23 add user. Okay, I think there is some issue here only. Let me just check once the code. We have index.html here. We have add button. We are calling the add button here on the top. Whenever event listener is there, click. It's gonna just go to transaction. It's gonna have a transaction on complete. Transaction has been completed for some reason. Then we'll be building the list and we're doing user form reset. First time. Post that whenever the success is called, it's gonna call build list. I think there's something I'm missing out, but don't worry, I think it should be clear. But for now, let me just add version 8 and just show you the happy scenario. I'm not sure why. Anyways, here John did not get added. USA 23. John got added. Ram India 67 add. And these are getting added here also. I'll just check out why it might be the issue later on, but for now, I think this is I think we are okay with the happy scenario at least. That I think you should understand. Anyways, now we have the, so I mentioned this to you. So now we need to handle the update scenario. For updating, what we have to do is like we need to basically, uh, so what is happening, at least I'll show you once here. Let me click on any of these elements. As you can see, li tag has this data key, but whenever we're clicking on it, it might be clicking on the span tag. Okay. So to avoid that issue, what will happen is like we'll be checking the closest ancestor of this wherever we clicked, which has this data key attribute. And whenever we get this data key attribute, we'll be taking this ID and using this ID, we'll be querying our IndexedDB to get the data from this IndexedDB and just put the data back into the form. And whenever we update this form after changing the values in this form, and click on update user, it will basically update a user in a database, and again it will build it will update the list with the new data. Okay. If I'm going fast, I'm just take just go. We can go back for some seconds. I guess. So, anyways, uh, so now we need to have update button. We'll do again prevent. Just not add the event prevent before, because by default the form will not be triggered if I'm not using submit event anyways. So anyways, we'll be having let ID equal to. We'll be checking with the user form if it has a key or not. So what I'll do is like whenever I'm clicking on those list of items in list basically inside the user list, I'll be updating the form and add a data key to it. Currently the form doesn't have any data key, as you can see, but whenever I'm clicking on this list of users, I'll be trying to append it. I'll be updating the form to have a data key so that I'll be understanding that this is an update form scenario, not the add scenario, which is the default scenario. So that's why I'll be adding dataset dot key. I'll check if either of ID is not there, or if for some reason DB is not there, then return, because this is not the update scenario otherwise. This ID needs to be present. So now we'll be again writing the same code. Let me just copy paste most of this. So we have the DB transaction. We'll not be doing read only, we'll be having read write because we want to update things. Whenever transaction is completed, we need to again build the list. So let me call this build list, and form also needs to be reset again because we have already done the update. We have the user store now. Before user store, let me write the user again, the user object. This will be ID. This will be name.value.trim. This will be the when the form, when we have updated the form. Whenever we click on update button, this will take the whatever values is there in the form. It will update the entry in the database. That's why I'm taking the values from the form again. I know there might be a doubt of how exactly we'll be triggering whenever I click on the list and it's gonna update a form. Don't worry, I'll be coming to that in a minute or so after this at least. Country. Here, as you can see, I've mentioned the key ID. There is no need of us to uniquely identify the elements because we have already told the key part is ID. So whenever you're sending the ID, IndexedDB will automatically figure it out. That's why it's somewhat different from, you can say, relation database or other forms of database. You need to specify the ID also specifically. But here that's why we don't need to specify anything, because automatic IndexedDB is intelligent with regards to that. Sorry, put will be user. So again, you can add the other things. Should I add it or not? I'll just remove it for now. Anyways, you can handle that, but here in the below, you can add update request dot on success on error, etc. So anyways, this is for the update scenario. So now whenever we click on this form, we need to update that. So to do that, let me come back to the user list. Let me write it above here only. So user list, whenever we click on any of the elements inside the user list, we need to call this event handler. This will be for what? E it will give us, and we can get the li element. Like I mentioned to you, we can use e.target. This will be an HTML element. Will give us closest method. So li element I'll be able to get only if the li element has a data key, which will be in our case everyone will have it, so not an issue. But that's what I'm doing here. Again, it's not tag, so you have to do it somehow. So in your li element, I'll check whether it has get attribute of data key or not. If suppose data key is not there, or if DD or if the DB is not there, or if the ID is not there, we'll just return. Just keeping TypeScript happy. So again, now we need to have similar code, paste. So user store will be, this will be read write again because I'll be updating the database. I think it should be read only this. Anyways, it's up to you. I think you can add only read on because I'll just be getting the data here. User store I got. So I'll be having get request. Let get request equal to user store dot get. I need to pass the ID which I got in the top. Then I need to call the get request on success. I can again put in transaction, but I'll be giving in here on success. Again, it will be request, which will have again the ev.target. We need to typecast it to IDB request. I don't know why we need to do it, but we need to do it. Like I know why we need to do it, but why is it not in part of standard? I don't know that part. Anyways, we have user request.result. We'll check. If suppose the user is not there, again to keep TypeScript happy, because there's a chance for user to not exist in this if this ID is not present. It's that. So then we'll be having the name which we have in the top. This is the form elements. I'm basically attaching these, changing the values in the form. User.name, name, country, age, and like I mentioned to you, I need to attach user form dot dataset dot key will be equal to ID. This is again the happy scenario. For the error scenario, you can again add it here. I'm just not adding it. Let us see if everything works fine or not. I'm having quite a doubt now. Why is it not happening every time? Let me debug it and come back. Okay, I understood what was the silly mistake. As you can see, I'm checking here like DB exists or not, but when I'm following a build list, first for the first time, in the success, I have not assigned a DB. So we need to assign it. So that was a mistake. I was doing it. DB dot target dot result as IDB database. So now DB will be assigned. So now let us see if everything works fine. Refresh. As you can see, it's working fine. Loading was initially there. Now when I click on it, it's going to assign this value. Let me come to application. Mohit, yeah. Now let me change my age. Make it to 28, suppose. And update user. So as you can see, it has been updated and the form has been reset. So that is the working fine now. And now whenever if you want to add again one more Mohit, country of origin again India. Age suppose random stuff. 120 I don't think exists. 35 add. As you can see, it's unique because IDs are unique. Again, it will work fine. So I think this was it. Update is done. Now we need to have the delete scenario. Delete is quite simpler in compared to others. So let me do one thing. Uh, Let me copy the update one and just modify things here and there. For delete again, I need to get the ID or a DB if it's not there. Read write again, I'll do it. I need to build list. I don't need to have an object here. I need to get a database. I need to call delete. I need to mention the ID. Save. That's it. This will be delete request. Save. Come back. Refresh. Now I'll call Mohit35. Clicked it. Delete. It has been deleted. As you can see here, 35 is there. Refresh. Not there. So yeah, add, update, delete is done. So most of the things which you would need, I think is done, but I'll cover some of the other things which are like indexes. Like in database also you have the indexes which basically does it better for you to, you have different kinds of in I would not go too much inside relation database concepts, but I'm just assuming you know the concept of indexing as such. I'll not be going explaining in details, but you can do something in the IDB index database also. So that I'll show you now. So we'll be going in the build list. So first of all, we need to create indexes. So like I mentioned to you, whenever you're changing the schema, you need to mention inside the upgrade needed. So I'll be coming here and add the indexes to it. So we'll be uh, first we need to have first we'll keep it outside because it will not be, I don't want it to be triggered because we'll already be having the database. So I'll be keeping it outside the code for now. So we'll be having object store dot create. I understood this will be an issue. So let me do one thing. Let me if you're changing a database, let me delete the database. So whenever you're changing the version, I would delete the data for it to work for now. So if it contains, I will do db dot delete object store user store. Then I'll create the db and I'll create the indexes also. Whenever I'm changing the version, I'm just deleting database. I'll have to again add the data. Don't worry about it. I'll add it manually. So object dot store create index. We can give any kind of unique names here. I give name index. I need to give it the which field I would like the index to be created on. Again, the database concept and names can be not be unique. Basically, Mohit can repeat multiple times. So hence, I'll give unique as false. You can add unique as true. That will add an extra constraint like you have in databases, but I'll keep it false. We can have compound indexes also, like having multiple. You can say entries here, as you can see. Can have multiple compound indexes also. I'll keep it simple and just add one indexes only. You can check out the MDN documentation on the resources for it. Country index, age index. Similarly, I have to give the keys which needs to map in the schema. So country. age. Here again, TypeScript can have enums or some other concepts, but I'll just keep things simple here. So we have this, done. So we can have the indexes now. So now let me come back and change the version, which is going to delete all the data on the top. 8 will become 9. Save. Data has been gone, but we have indexes now. So let me add Mohit, India, random number, Adam, which is starting from A, USA, 45, add. Again, I repeat my name, Mohit, India, 34. Now, as you can see here, first of all, let me refresh it. As you can see, it has been sorted in the name index. As you can see, Adam, Mohit, and it's based on the key path is this primary key. As you can see, it's saying this is the primary key. Country will be based on the country's name, which is India is alphabetically ahead. So I then you. Age again will be a form of numbers 23, 34, 45. Now we can sort. Basically, currently we are showing the data based on the entries which is coming in the insertion order, I guess. I'm assuming that. I'm not completely sure about it. Its name is India. No, name is Mohit, Adam, and Mohit. So I think it's coming in the insertion order. We can change the ordering in here whenever we're building the list. So let me come down here. Instead of doing get on request, we can give kind of a range also, by the way. So like you have different in if you're writing SQL or no SQL, you have different ways of giving a constraints. Like suppose you want the age to be in between this range to this range. You want the character you want the names to include this kind of character or that character. So different kinds of things which you can do in IndexedDB also, which is using the range cursor, I guess. Sorry, the IDB key range. It gives you a lot of functions inside it. You can check it out. It's available in the documentation as such. I'll not be going through much inside it, but I'll just show a simple example here. So let me write let range equal to IDB key range dot bound. Basically, the range I'm giving the lower region to upper region. These are the values only it's going to permit. So I'll be giving it, I'll be sorting based on the number, age. It will become clear whatever I'm not saying, whatever is not being clear when you see the output. Anyways, I'll give it 20 to 25 range that I want the values to be only in this range. So I want the sorting to be done on the age itself. So I'll write age index user store dot index. I'll mention the index. Again, I have to give the same name here, which I mentioned at the top in the success there. Again, TypeScript could help here. I'll just keep it simple. Again, I'll create the let all get all request. Here, instead of giving get all, I'll be using age index because I want a list to be generated from the index instead of the default user store. And I have to give a range to it. Basically, the ages should be in between this range, 2025. Only those will be shown. So let me come here and see. As you can see, only 23 is being shown, but there are 23, 34, 40. Three entries are there because I've said that I want a range only from 20 to 25. Now, if I increase the range to 35, suppose, save. As you can see, two entries are coming up now. So that is, I just wanted to show it to you. Now, for now, I'll do it 550 entries so that I have 100 maximum age. So it works for you. Anyway, the code is commented. You can uncomment that part and comment this part out. It's up to you. So keep cursor is range is done. So now I need to mention to you cursor. There are different ways of iterating over data. Like you can imagine, I think I'm not sure. I think in relation database also there is a concept of cursor. I'm forgetting some stuff for relation database. But you can imagine like instead of iterating using the indexes, you can iterate using something called cursor, which gives you more control about the data. Why would you do it? It's up to you based on your application needs, but I'll just show it to you how you can do it. And instead of, I'll just do console log instead of building the list. So I want to keep this code also. So for that, let me write age ID X. Then I have to write open cursor. Now you can do different ways of iteration. You can do in the form of direction basically from top to bottom or from bottom to top or from different, there are four, I think, ranges, different ways of doing it. Unique, previous, unique. I don't want to make this video more bigger than how much it already is, so I would suggest you to check out the MDN documentation. But let me write the range. Let me write next, and again on success. Now if the cursor exists for this entry, for this index, just a happy scenario, I'll do console.log the entries. That will be cursor source dot name, cursor direction, which direction it's iterating over, cursor key, what is the key and what is the primary key. Now this is the if scenario, else will be the end of cursor. Now you can imagine, like, I don't have any while, and by the way, interesting thing is, like, you don't need to have a while loop here. IndexedDB is smart enough to know that if suppose you're calling just let me write this end of cursor. So what I was saying was, like, IndexedDB is smart enough to know that you would like to call this on success again and again. If you mention in here cursor dot continue, so this will trigger the on success event callback again and again until unless we reach the end of cursor. It's like you can imagine a while loop, and it's handled by IndexedDB instead. Calls on success. So now if we come back here, go to console. As you can see, we have age index, which is the source name. Direction is next, like I mentioned to you. Key is the value which we have, 23, and primary key is the primary key, and it's going to continue. If suppose you mention here previous, I think it was what? Leave, I guess. It will be from bottom to top, like 45, 34, 20, like I mentioned to you. And suppose unique. Unique is for, let me enter another entry with the same age. Just showing it to you once. It's quite simple. Same entry I'm doing. With age is same. Let me remove this something to else. But entry is same 23. So now we again have multiple entries of 23. So if you want to only have next unique, only have the unique entries for this age index, that will only show 23 once. So that was it for this part. So I think this was it for this whole video. I guess it was a very long video, I feel like. But I think this should clear your grounds to make you work with, allow you to work with IndexedDB. There are a lot of things which I have not covered, which it's very difficult to go in one video. Let me know if you would like me to go more extensive in IndexedDB. And I'm thinking of planning to create a React hook also in future. I'm not sure whenever I get the time. So when I create the React hook, which is going to be kind of a wrapper on this IndexedDB, I'll just put in the YouTube description. If you're interested, you can check that out as well. And I think that's it for this whole video, and bye.